Picture a universe where the most magnificent secrets are not bathed in blinding, aggressive starlight, but are carefully hidden in the vast, quiet spaces between the constellations. We're about to embark on a journey into a permanent shadowy twilight, where colossal, unseen spheres drift silently through the interstellar void. These elusive wanderers act as the ultimate missing links of creation, silently holding the profound mechanics of our entire galactic history within their dense, metallic hearts. Imagine witnessing a massive celestial body's long and lonely descent toward absolute zero, a beautifully slow surrender of ancient thermal energy that spans trillions of years. Every moment of their existence is defined by this graceful struggle against the freezing cold, a gradual fading that characterizes their entire physical history. They are not simply dying embers or cosmic failures, but highly complex, enduring worlds that seamlessly bridge the staggering gap between the heaviest gas giant planets and the lightest red dwarf stars. Surprisingly, the universe cultivates a vibrant, mesmerizing diversity that thrives entirely within this freezing obscurity, far removed from the violent, roaring majesty of main-sequence suns. This cosmic structure is a breathtaking masterpiece of quiet endurance, a world that trades the fleeting, explosive glory of nuclear fire for an eternal, unyielding stability in the dark. By existing so perfectly in the shadows, these massive spheres force us to completely rethink the architecture of celestial evolution and the hidden, invisible weight of the night sky. If we were to look closer, we would discover that these dark sentinels far outnumber the brilliant beacons that usually capture our attention, forming a massive, silent web across the Milky Way. Their story is one of isolation and profound peace, a trillion-year narrative that offers the perfect sanctuary for a mind-seeking refuge from the noise of the day. Tonight, the quiet, cooling rhythm of their endless journey will serve as your guide, leading you gently into the deepest, most restorative rest. This quiet room is now your own personal sanctuary, perfectly insulated from the demands and the hurried pace of the waking world. You are safe. These wonders are yours to inherit as you sleep. Let the immense, calming gravity of these distant twilight worlds anchor your resting body firmly to the mattress, pulling away every last trace of tension from your muscles. As your breathing slows to a natural, effortless rhythm, we will travel together far beyond the familiar burning stars to a place of absolute, lightless calm. Our minds will drift outward into the silence of the great void, seeking the faint, glowing embers that wait at the very edge of perception. Deep within the cosmic dark, brown dwarfs emit a faint, ghostly luminescence that defies our traditional understanding of the celestial tapestry. Far from the blinding majesty of main-sequence stars, these massive bodies exist in a permanent shadowy twilight. They drift silently through the interstellar void, cloaked in an eternal night that barely registers against the absolute freezing blackness of deep space. This subtle radiance is not born from the fierce, roaring nuclear fusion that powers our own sun, but from a quiet, lingering warmth trapped within. As they travel through the unforgiving vacuum, they slowly bleed their ancient heat into the surrounding cosmos, creating a gentle, almost imperceptible halo of energy. The sheer isolation of these objects only enhances their spectral beauty, rendering them as solitary, fading beacons in an unimaginably vast ocean of emptiness. To witness one firsthand would be to gaze upon a true phantom of the cosmos, a massive structure hovering on the very edge of human visibility. Their existence fundamentally challenges the simple binary concept of light and dark. They prove that the universe holds its most profound and hypnotic mysteries within its dimmest, quietest corners. Relying purely on our biological senses, the sky where these titans reside would appear completely empty and utterly devoid of form. These mysterious objects are nearly invisible to human eyes because they radiate the vast majority of their energy far beyond the visible spectrum, deep in the infrared. The human retina is entirely blind to the low-energy photons that these subdued spheres constantly broadcast into the surrounding void. Instead of painting the cosmos with brilliant whites and piercing blues, their light is a slow, rhythmic pulse of thermal radiation. They are absolute masters of celestial camouflage, hiding their immense bulk and swirling storms behind an impenetrable veil of optical silence. A traveller looking out a viewport would see nothing but the unyielding darkness of interstellar space, completely unaware of the massive world looming nearby. Only when we translate their invisible heat into a language our visual cortex can comprehend do they finally reveal their true, magnificent forms. Through the lens of an infrared sensor, the empty blackness suddenly blazes with the gentle, radiant heat of 1,000 hidden worlds. The universe reserves some of its most extraordinary wonders for those willing to look beyond the natural limits of human perception. Surprisingly, the universe colours the warmest of these elusive spheres not a muddy brown, but a deep, dull magenta. Despite the incredibly misleading moniker assigned by early astronomers, these celestial bodies possess a mesmerising and entirely unexpected visual palette. When they are young and relatively hot, their thick atmospheres absorb specific wavelengths of light while allowing others to escape into the dark. The overwhelming presence of sodium and potassium in their churning outer layers selectively swallows the green and yellow light from their internal glow. What manages to pierce through the heavy toxic clouds is a strange, beautiful combination of red and blue light blending together. This complex optical filtering paints the entire sphere in a bruising, hypnotic shade of purplish red that exists nowhere else in the stellar catalogue. Picture a colossal orb glowing like a bruised plum, hanging suspended and weightless in the freezing cosmic ocean. This magenta radiance is fleeting on a cosmic timescale, representing only the brief, vibrant youth of a world destined for eternal cold. It is a stunning, singular hue that perfectly encapsulates the strange, transitional nature of an object caught forever between planet and star. If we were to look closer at their turbulent surfaces, we would see no blinding glare, no searing corona to force our eyes away. Unlike the violent, searing brilliance of our local star, a brown dwarf offers a muted, highly approachable visual majesty. The light it casts is profoundly soft, entirely lacking the harsh, aggressive photon pressure that characterizes true, hydrogen-burning stars. A theoretical observer floating in high orbit would not need tinted visors or heavy shielding to gaze upon the churning atmosphere below. The gentle illumination is more akin to the dying embers of a hearth, casting long, soft shadows across any orbiting rocky moons. This subdued lighting creates an eerie environment of perpetual dusk, where the concept of a bright, glaring noon simply does not exist. The absolute absence of a blinding glare allows the intricate swirling details of their cloud decks to be observed in stunning, uninterrupted clarity. Massive storm systems and swirling atmospheric bands are rendered in subtle, glowing contrasts rather than being completely washed out by overwhelming stellar fire. It is a serene, hauntingly beautiful visual experience that stands in stark contrast to the aggressive, fiery nature of a typical solar body. Searching the heavens for these hidden giants requires abandoning traditional optical astronomy entirely. Astronomers must use specialized heat-sensing telescopes, often positioned high above Earth's atmosphere, just to locate their subtle thermal signatures against the freezing background. These highly sensitive instruments are designed to detect the absolute faintest whispers of warmth radiating from objects located countless light years away. The exhaustive process is comparable to searching for a single warm stone hidden within a vast snow-covered landscape under the pitch black of night. Spacecraft equipped with cryogenically cooled sensors constantly sweep the sky, meticulously mapping the microscopic variations in background temperature. Only through this painstaking heat-mapping process can the faint glowing embers of these substellar objects be effectively coaxed out of the darkness. When a celestial signature is finally captured, it appears not as a sharp, brilliant point of light, but as a soft, diffused glow of thermal data. This invisible hunt highlights the incredible lengths humanity must go to in order to understand the true hidden population of our local galaxy. The cosmos refuses to surrender the locations of these dark spheres easily, demanding unparalleled technological ingenuity to unveil their silent presence. Picture a glowing ember pulled from a raging fire, slowly losing its inner light as it cools against the unforgiving chill of the night. This is the precise, tragic life cycle of a brown dwarf, perfectly mirrored on a massive galactic scale. Deprived of the active nuclear furnace that sustains true stars, they are born with a finite, steadily depleting reservoir of thermal energy. The vibrant, deep magenta of their volatile youth inevitably dulls into an angry, bruised red before finally fading into complete invisibility. They are grand, celestial monuments to entropy, beautifully illustrating the universe's unstoppable, one-way march toward coldness and dark. Observing them is exactly like watching a magnificent cosmic timepiece slowly winding down, ticking away the aeons through a steady, measurable loss of radiant heat. This cosmic structure emits its faint light solely from the residual heat generated during its violent gravitational collapse millions of years ago. When the primordial cloud of interstellar gas and dust first slammed together to form the dwarf, the sheer friction and immense pressure created a massive spike in temperature. That ancient kinetic energy was securely trapped within the dense core, and it remains the absolute only source of the glow we observe today. Without the sustained, roaring fires of hydrogen fusion to replenish this internal energy, the giant sphere functions as an immense, slowly draining thermal battery. The trapped heat slowly radiates outward from the crushing pressures of the core, pushing through thousands of miles of dense metallic clouds before finally escaping into the void. It is a ghostly thermal afterglow, a silent echo of the violent birth pangs that originally brought the massive celestial body into existence. Every single photon that manages to break free from the swirling atmosphere carries away a tiny, irreplaceable fraction of that original finite heat. This means that the dim light we see is not a sign of active creation, but rather the slow, inevitable exhaustion of primordial energy. They are luminous, astronomical fossils, broadcasting the fading memory of their own turbulent genesis across the dark interstellar expanse. As the silent aeons pass, the inevitable cooling process fundamentally alters the outward appearance of these solitary, wandering titans. Over billions of years, their visual profile shifts dramatically from a dull, glowing red to complete pitch-black obscurity. They embark on a solitary one-way journey across the electromagnetic spectrum, migrating from faintly visible to completely undetectable by anything other than immense gravity. The visual transition is painfully slow, marked by the gradual formation of increasingly complex and thick cloud layers that further smother their fading internal light. Once the surface temperature inevitably drops below a critical threshold, the last vestiges of visible red light are extinguished forever. They become entirely dark, rogue spheres, virtually indistinguishable from the lightless cosmic void they continuously traverse. In this final, frozen state, they roam the endless galaxy as invisible phantoms, known to the universe only by the gravitational pull they exert on passing objects. This steady descent into absolute darkness is the ultimate, inescapable fate of every single brown dwarf, a silent fade to black that spans the entire age of the universe. They serve as a haunting reminder of the impermanence of light, destined to spend all of eternity hiding in the absolute shadows. Notice how their inherent faintness and incredibly slow cooling rates make them the perfect hiding places for ancient, undisturbed cosmic secrets. Because they do not constantly bathe their surroundings in harsh, destructive ultraviolet radiation, their immediate vicinity remains a pristine, chemically stable environment. The complete lack of aggressive stellar winds allows extremely delicate structures and ancient molecular clouds to survive in their orbit for billions of years. These dark spheres act as massive galactic time capsules, perfectly preserving the exact chemical composition of the nebula from which they were originally born. A traveller who could somehow navigate the pitch-black space around them would find a museum of primordial matter perfectly preserved in the deep freeze of their shadow. Fragile dust grains, rare ice crystals, and complex organic molecules exist here unmolested by the violent forces that typically scour the space near main sequence stars. By meticulously studying the undisturbed environment surrounding these hidden giants, astrophysicists can unlock the precise conditions of the early galaxy. Their very optical obscurity is what effectively shields these profound mysteries from destruction, keeping them eternally safe in the cold dark. They are silent, unassuming guardians of history, holding on to the universe's oldest secrets within their gentle, fading gravitational embrace. Despite their dark, serene appearance from a distance, a profound and startling deception lies at the very heart of their existence. The absolute quiet of their visual spectrum effectively masks the intense chaotic activity continuously occurring just below their heavy, obscuring upper atmospheres. What appears to a casual observer to be a dead, frozen cinder is actually a churning, violent cauldron of extreme pressures and supersonic winds. Deep beneath the thick, obscuring layers of methane and silicate dust, the interior of the dwarf is racked by massive planetary-scale convective currents. Colossal storms, dwarfing absolutely anything seen on Jupiter, dredge up searing hot gas from the crushing depths of the interior before violently sinking back down. This turbulent, non-stop mixing creates a complex, highly dynamic environment that is completely hidden from the gentle, invisible infrared radiation bleeding into space. To peer beneath the tranquil, dark exterior is to discover an alien world of unrestrained atmospheric violence and magnetic fury. Their outward silence is nothing more than an optical illusion, a grand cosmic sleight of hand that perfectly conceals a roaring, turbulent reality. The true nature of the brown dwarf is a stark, fascinating contrast between its invisible, quiet exterior and the ferocious, unrelenting storms tearing through its dense metallic heart. These vast molecular clouds, spanning dozens of light years, are woven with delicate tendrils of freezing hydrogen and primordial dust. When a localized pocket of this interstellar webbing becomes too heavy to support its own weight, it inevitably collapses inward, pulling everything toward a central, deepening gravity well. This dramatic implosion is the universal spark of stellar genesis, a magnificent gathering of raw material meant to ignite a new sun. As the falling matter compresses, it heats up, generating the intense initial pressures required to build a massive core. The infant brown dwarf embarks on this grand journey with the absolute promise of becoming a burning beacon in the dark. It is only the unpredictable distribution of the surrounding nebula that will ultimately betray this bright, fiery potential. Their tragic destiny is sealed simply because they ran out of surrounding material before gathering enough mass to ignite sustained nuclear fusion. The cosmic reservoir of gas and dust feeding their initial growth suddenly runs dry, severing the vital umbilical cord of infalling matter. Without this crucial, continuous diet of raw hydrogen, the central pressure never quite reaches the critical threshold required to spark a lasting stellar fire. Notice how your own breathing settles into a steady, rhythmic pattern as you visualize this quiet, invisible starvation deep in the cosmos. The growing core desperately needs just a fraction more mass to cross the threshold into true stardom, but the dark void offers nothing more to consume. It is a profound, silent tragedy of celestial mechanics, a magnificent engine constructed perfectly, but denied the final drop of fuel necessary to run. The initial surge of heat from their violent contraction is not enough to sustain them. It is merely a temporary fading flush of youth. They are left stranded on the very threshold of ignition, fundamentally complete in their structure but eternally dormant in their function. The universe abruptly halts their evolution, leaving them to simmer in the dark as massive, unfinished monuments to what might have been. Imagine a stellar fetus whose vital growth was abruptly halted by the aggressive, turbulent winds of larger, more successful neighbouring stars. Within the crowded, chaotic environment of a molecular cloud, the birth of a massive, searing blue giant can spell doom for the smaller, forming bodies nearby. These gargantuan siblings ignite with such fierce intensity that their outward radiation forcefully blows away the remaining reservoirs of loose gas and dust. The delicate, swirling accretion disks feeding the infant brown dwarfs are ruthlessly stripped away by this powerful, relentless stellar gale. Deprived of their protective and nourishing envelopes, the growing cores are left naked and starving, their grand potential permanently scattered into the interstellar wind. It is an incredibly hostile nursery, where only the swiftest and most massive protostars manage to secure their future before the raw materials are violently dispersed. This ruthless cosmic competition ensures that a vast population of these celestial bodies will forever remain in the dark, stunted by the success of their peers. They are the quiet victims of a magnificent roaring stellar ignition happening just light years away. Their dark, silent forms bear witness to the incredibly precarious and competitive nature of planetary and stellar formation. To qualify as a true member of this shadowy twilight family, a celestial body must fall within a very specific narrow mass range. Astrophysicists define their existence by a strict boundary, requiring them to be anywhere from roughly 13 to 80 times more massive than our own local gas giant Jupiter. This precise measurement is the absolute dividing line between a mere planetary body and a genuine, albeit failed, stellar core. Yet, even at 80 times the bulk of a typical gas giant, they still fall agonizingly short of true greatness. They exist in a perfectly defined cosmic purgatory, mathematically locked into a mass bracket that denies them both the safety of being a planet and the glory of being a star. It is a precise numerical definition of celestial failure, written eternally into their immense crushing gravity. Any lighter than this incredibly specific threshold, and the object is fundamentally reclassified as a mere gas giant, often wandering as a rogue planet. Below the critical mass required to ignite even the most fragile isotopes, the internal core remains completely inert from the moment of its creation. These lighter spheres lack the crushing internal pressures necessary to generate even a temporary fleeting spark of localized nuclear chemistry. Let the subtle weight of your own body pressing into your seat anchor you as we explore these massive but ultimately lifeless drifters. Without the defining characteristic of isotopic fusion, they are stripped of their stellar titles and relegated to the status of oversized wandering planets. They are essentially identical in composition to the giants in our own solar system, differing only in their absolute isolation from any parent star. These solitary gas giants drift through the galaxy without ever having experienced the brief, violent heat of a brown dwarf's youth. They are born cold and remain cold, silent witnesses to the turbulent, fiery processes happening in the more massive cores around them. The universe draws a harsh, unforgiving line, separating those that almost burned from those that never had a chance. Conversely, if they had managed to gather just a fraction more mass, any heavier core would have successfully ignited hydrogen, becoming a true burning red dwarf star. The upper boundary of their existence is an incredibly fragile threshold, where the internal temperature finally reaches the millions of degrees required to fuse the simplest elements. Crossing this invisible line transforms a dark, fading ember into a stable, glowing sun capable of shining for trillions of years. This microscopic difference in primordial mass alters the entire, eternal destiny of the celestial object in question. A red dwarf, though small and dim compared to our sun, possesses a stable, roaring internal furnace that constantly fights back against the crushing weight of its own gravity. It is a complete triumphant stellar engine, capable of warming orbiting worlds and potentially supporting the delicate chemistry of life. The brown dwarf is the tragic mirror image of this success, forever trapped on the wrong side of the ignition boundary by a mere cosmic rounding error. They are separated from true immortality by a hauntingly small margin of gathered dust, eternally penalized for their slight celestial deficiency. The boundary between infinite light and eternal dark is shockingly thin, decided entirely by the chaotic whims of a dying nebula. Deep within these collapsing clouds, the conservation of angular momentum violently shapes them into rapidly spinning, perfectly isolated spheres. As the initial, massive cloud of primordial gas falls inward toward the centre of gravity, any slight microscopic rotation it possessed is dramatically amplified. This is the exact same physical mechanism that causes a figure skater to spin faster as they draw their arms inward. By the time the dark core has fully condensed, it is whirling on its axis at terrifying, almost incomprehensible speeds. Some of these failed stars complete a full, chaotic rotation in just a few hours, creating a massive, bulging equator and immense atmospheric shear. This violent spinning generates a fierce internal dynamo, whipping their metallic clouds into the colossal raging storms that define their complex weather systems. The sheer kinetic energy of their rotation ensures that they are never truly still, even as their internal heat endlessly bleeds away into the void. They pirouette alone in the freezing dark, perfectly spherical tops spun by the ancient dying breath of a collapsed nebula. Their rapid, silent spinning is a permanent kinetic fossil of the chaotic, swirling environment that originally brought them into existence. Surprisingly, the universe is a chaotic billiard table, and some of these objects are violently ejected from their home systems before they can even finish gathering their full mass. In multiple star systems, the complex overlapping gravitational fields can create highly unstable, intersecting orbits that spell doom for the smallest siblings. During the chaotic early days of formation, a close encounter with a massive dominant protostar can act as a massive cosmic slingshot. Allow your muscles to fully relax, releasing any held tension as you picture this silent, forceful eviction from a crowded celestial nursery. The smaller, still-forming dwarf is abruptly hurled out of its native gravitational well, accelerating wildly into the dark, empty interstellar expanse. This violent, sudden expulsion instantly severs their connection to the rich, nourishing accretion disk, permanently halting their growth and sealing their fate as failed stars. They are thrust into the freezing void as cosmic orphans, exiled from the very family that provided the raw materials for their creation. This incredibly harsh mechanism ensures that a significant portion of these twilight objects will spend their entire existence drifting completely alone. They are refugees of gravitational warfare cast out into the dark merely because they were the smallest bodies in a crowded, violent room. This abruptly aborted formation process leaves them trapped in a permanent, unyielding state of arrested celestial development. Unlike true stars that continuously evolve through dramatic, distinct life stages, these objects are frozen in a kind of eternal infancy. They are massive, complex structures that simply stop changing, condemned to an endless, repetitive cycle of cooling and darkening. Because they do not burn through their nuclear fuel, they do not face the explosive, violent deaths that characterize the end of massive stars. Instead, they endure in a quiet, unchanging stasis, slowly fading away over trillions of years without ever altering their fundamental nature. It is a profound, melancholic existence, a permanent state of waiting for a stellar dawn that the laws of physics guarantee will never arrive. This cosmic structure might seem like a rare, tragic anomaly, but the universe is likely filled with billions of these cast-offs wandering completely alone. For decades, their dark, invisible nature led astronomers to mistakenly believe that stellar failure was a relatively uncommon, isolated event. However, as our infrared technology has improved, we are slowly uncovering a vast hidden population that dwarfs our previous naive estimations. The empty spaces between the brilliant burning stars are not truly empty. They are teeming with these silent cooling spheres drifting through the dark. Some models suggest there could be almost as many of these unseen wanderers scattered across our galaxy as there are visible, main sequence stars in the night sky. They form a massive, invisible web of mass, fundamentally altering our understanding of the true gravitational weight and composition of the Milky Way. To look up at the night sky is to see only a fraction of the galaxy's true population, a brilliant but misleadingly incomplete picture of creation. The dark spaces are just as populated, filled with countless billions of worlds that quietly endure without ever casting a shadow. They are the silent, unseen majority of the cosmos, proving that absolute brilliance is the exception and quiet endurance is the true rule of the universe. To deeply understand this quiet endurance, we must plunge beneath their heavily obscured upper atmospheres, where the physical reality is dictated by an immense, crushing weight. Deep within these turbulent, lightless depths, the sheer gravitational forces press inward with an almost inconceivable ferocity, creating a central core of truly extraordinary density. Every single atom is violently pushed together by the monumental mass of the atmospheric layers above, generating a planetary pressure cooker of apocalyptic, incomprehensible proportions. Yet, this incredible, mind-bending squeezing ultimately falls just fractionally short of the critical mathematical threshold required to successfully ignite the sustained fusion of ordinary hydrogen. It is a profound, frustrating paradox of celestial physics, an environment so violently compressed that it defies all earthly comprehension, yet remains fundamentally too weak to spark a lasting stellar fire. The atoms are packed shoulder to shoulder, trembling with trapped kinetic energy, but they simply lack that final, microscopic push needed to fuse and release blinding eternal energy. This agonizing near miss essentially dictates their entire endless existence, locking them permanently into a state of immense, unimaginable pressure without the explosive, outward release of genuine starlight. They are eternally caught in the suffocating grip of their own immense gravity, serving as colossal monuments to a physical process that was halted mere moments before its triumphant climax. Their entire architectural existence is defined by this singular failure to cross the final threshold. Astronomers often saddle these incredibly dense spheres with the melancholic, somewhat dismissive title of failed stars, a label that unfairly implies a fundamental cosmic defect. If we were to look closer at their extraordinary resilience, however, we would quickly realise they are actually incredibly successful at surviving indefinitely in their own uniquely balanced state. They completely bypass the catastrophic, self-destructive fate of massive stars, never tearing themselves apart in violent, blinding supernovae that scatter their ashes across the void. Notice the steady, calm rhythm of your own heartbeat as you consider this remarkable, unwavering endurance in the face of absolute, freezing darkness. By entirely avoiding the volatile, intensely consuming life cycle of a burning sun, they achieve a form of eternal, unwavering stability that main sequence objects can absolutely never attain. Their highly publicized failure to initially ignite is, in cosmic reality, a masterful, unintentional strategy for outliving almost everything else in the swirling, chaotic galactic tapestry. They represent the ultimate triumph of quiet longevity over fleeting, fiery brilliance, enduring as silent sentinels long after the brightest neighbours have spectacularly perished. Far from being celestial mistakes, they are the undisputed champions of cosmic survival, perfectly adapted to wait out the slow, inevitable dimming of the wider universe. In the grand calculus of the cosmos, their quiet endurance outlasts the furious burning of 1 trillion brilliant suns. Peering back into the deep, mysterious history of their turbulent earliest days reveals a surprising, violent secret hidden far beneath their dark, modern exteriors. There was, in verifiable fact, a brief and remarkably fierce period during their absolute infancy, when they possessed a true, burning inner fire that rivaled actual stars. Before the long, slow, eternal freeze permanently set in, the crushing weight of their initial collapse was sufficient to ignite a highly sensitive, specialized form of primitive nuclear fusion. This primeval, chaotic era was characterized by a roaring internal furnace that fiercely pushed back against the crushing, suffocating gravity of the original collapsing cloud. The newborn celestial object blazed with a fierce localized intensity, successfully mimicking the radiant glory of a genuine stellar body for a fleeting, beautiful cosmic moment. It is a hidden, violently fiery past that directly contradicts their current, frozen, silent state, proving beyond a doubt that they are not entirely strangers to the roaring nuclear flame. For a few million years, they bathed their immediate surroundings in a warm, life-giving glow, fully participating in the grand, luminous dance of the active stellar nursery. This brief, fiery rebellion temporarily held the crushing darkness at bay. It is a haunting reminder that even these frozen giants once knew the fierce heat of true creation. This temporary brilliant illumination is fueled entirely by a rare, incredibly fragile heavy isotope of hydrogen, forged in the very first chaotic moments of the expanding universe. Because this highly exotic, ancient fuel requires significantly less ambient pressure and heat to fuse than its ordinary counterpart, it acts as a highly combustible, cosmic kindling. The heavy atoms willingly merge and break apart under the intermediate crushing pressures of the young dwarf's core, releasing a sudden, powerful burst of trapped thermal energy. Surprisingly, the universe scatters only a microscopic, vanishingly thin dusting of this precious isotope throughout the vast, swirling expanses of the active stellar nurseries. The infant, starving sphere greedily consumes this incredibly rare bounty, burning brilliantly but highly inefficiently as it desperately attempts to stave off the encroaching, inevitable dark. This specialized, highly sensitive chemistry allows even a relatively low-mass, borderline object to briefly simulate the blinding, sustained output of true, eternal starlight. It is a magnificent chemical sleight of hand, a temporary illusion of stellar grandeur built entirely upon the fragile foundation of a severely limited, unreplenishable cosmic resource. The dwarf trades its precious ancient heritage for just a few moments of blazing glory. Once this rare resource is depleted, the light is extinguished forever. Let your shoulders drop and fully relax, deliberately mirroring the sudden quiet collapse of outward pressure as the core's fleeting nuclear heartbeat finally and permanently ceases. The immense crushing weight of the massive outer layers violently reasserts itself, squeezing the newly dead furnace even tighter now that the outward push of fusion has completely vanished. From this exact defining moment forward, the massive celestial body will never generate another single spark of new, internal energy, beginning its endless, one-way cooling descent, stripped entirely of the roaring outward thermal expansion that keeps ordinary burning stars fully inflated against the relentless pull of their own massive gravity. These dark spheres must adapt. They must rely on a completely different, far stranger physical law to avoid completely collapsing inward and vanishing into a microscopic, super-dense singularity. They are entirely supported and structurally maintained by a bizarre, invisible quantum mechanical effect known to theoretical physicists as extreme electron degeneracy pressure. This invisible, unbreakable structural force field takes over the monumental, unending task of holding up the crushing, apocalyptic weight of the entire heavy planetary atmosphere. Instead of utilizing the fierce, roaring heat of ongoing nuclear fusion to continuously push outward, the core relies exclusively on the fundamental, mathematically unbreakable rules governing subatomic particles. It is a completely alien, counterintuitive method of structural support, separating their basic architecture entirely from both the puffy gas giants and the brilliantly burning suns. They actively endure the crushing, lightless depths, not through the forceful application of heat, but through the inflexible, rigid mathematical stubbornness of advanced quantum physics. The core becomes a bizarre monument to the strange, underlying rules that govern reality at a microscopic level. It perfectly bridges the vast gap between the physics of the incredibly large and the incomprehensibly small. Deep within the absolute crushing centre of this immense gravitational trap, the very fabric of matter itself is squeezed into an unrecognisable, ultra-dense and highly exotic state. Quantum mechanics strictly dictates an unbreakable universal law. Absolutely no two identical subatomic particles can occupy the exact same physical space at the exact same energetic moment. As gravity relentlessly and blindly attempts to crush the core into complete oblivion, the furiously orbiting electrons violently rebel against being squeezed any closer together. This aggressive subatomic resistance creates an incredibly powerful, outward-pushing structural force that is entirely and permanently independent of either ambient temperature or internal chemical composition. Even as the massive silent core eventually cools down to near absolute zero over trillions of years, this quantum repulsion remains completely unfazed and rigidly structurally sound. It is a fascinating, invisible armour directly forged from the absolute fundamental limits of the universe itself, standing endlessly firm against the cosmos's most crushing gravitational forces. The sheer weight of dozens of massive planets is effortlessly held back by the refusal of microscopic particles to mathematically overlap in the dark. Nature simply refuses to allow these identical particles to collapse into the exact same energetic state. This microscopic rebellion is the absolute only thing keeping the massive sphere from vanishing entirely. Picture a tightly packed heavy sphere of atoms locked permanently into an unbreakable, unyielding quantum gridlock that definitively and forever stops any further celestial collapse. The interior environment becomes a bizarre, highly rigid state of exotic matter that behaves far more like a massive, unbreakable metallic solid than a swirling, chaotic gas. The subatomic particles are crammed together so incredibly tightly that they form an impenetrable, shimmering lattice, trembling constantly with trapped kinetic energy, but entirely unable to physically move. Take a deep, slow breath and tangibly feel the solid, unyielding support of the chair beneath you, directly echoing the unbreakable, rigid structural integrity of this degenerate core. This silent metallic heart is practically and theoretically indestructible, easily capable of withstanding external pressures that would completely and effortlessly pulverize any normal rocky planetary structure. It is a bizarre state of absolute pressurized stasis, a monumental testament to the unyielding, invisible boundaries of physics holding fast against the terrifying, crushing dark. Trapped in this microscopic quantum traffic jam, the core becomes a perfect, flawless sphere of ultimate resistance, denying gravity its final, ultimate victory. The immense pressure essentially forges a planetary heart stronger than any known earthly material. It is a fortress of compressed energy, completely impenetrable and eternally silent. Because of this highly exotic, completely quantum-locked interior architecture, these twilight objects exhibit a profoundly counterintuitive, almost magical reaction to the addition of more physical material. In the normal, everyday physical realm that we inhabit, piling more matter onto any given object naturally and inevitably causes its overall volume and physical diameter to expand. However, actively dumping more heavy mass onto a brown dwarf actually forces its immense gravitational field to become even stronger, causing the entire sphere to physically shrink in size. The newly added crushing weight acts exactly like a colossal, invisible cosmic vice, squeezing the stubborn, degenerate core just a fraction tighter against its absolute quantum limits. It is a bizarre, paradoxical realm of extreme physics where actively gaining weight directly and measurably results in a significantly smaller, profoundly denser celestial profile. This baffling, backwards mechanical trait perfectly illustrates just how far removed these silent objects are from the standard, easily intuitive laws governing everyday, normal planetary bodies. The more you feed this massive, silent beast, the smaller and tighter it physically becomes, folding the added bulk into an increasingly microscopic, impossibly heavy space. Gravity folds the new material inward, crushing the additional bulk into the already unyielding quantum lattice. The sphere stubbornly refuses to grow outward, choosing instead to endlessly densify its dark interior. This incredible, counterintuitive gravitational shrinking effect ultimately leads to one of the most astonishing, deceptive visual realities found anywhere in the entire observable cosmos. A massive, heavy brown dwarf containing an unfathomable 70 times the sheer bulk of our local gas giant is roughly the exact same physical diameter as the giant itself. The completely incomprehensible amount of extra heavy matter is simply and forcefully crammed into the exact same spatial footprint, resulting in an internal density that completely defies human imagination. If you were to theoretically place them side by side in the void, they would appear as identical, perfect twin spheres, completely betraying the massive, crushing disparity in their true internal weight. A single teaspoon of the exotic metallic material scooped directly from the core of the heavier sphere would weigh countless tons on Earth, while the identical-looking planetary twin would be comparatively hollow and light. It is the ultimate grand cosmic deception, scientifically proving that in the twilight regions of the invisible galaxy, monumental mass can hide perfectly behind a seemingly ordinary, unassuming planetary facade. They masquerade seamlessly as regular everyday planets, hiding their immense, crushing, star-like weight directly behind the simple illusion of a familiar, modest physical size. This brilliant disguise allows them to slip completely unnoticed through the ranks of ordinary gas giants. Only their immense, invisible gravitational pull eventually betrays the terrifying, ultra-dense reality hiding beneath their stormy clouds. Beyond the terrifying, ultra-dense reality hiding beneath their stormy clouds, these spheres host the most extreme and violent weather systems imaginable in the known universe. Far removed from the relative calmness of Earth's gentle breezes and seasonal rains, the atmosphere of a brown dwarf is a theatre of perpetual high-energy chaos that never ceases. The sheer scale of the kinetic energy involved in these atmospheric cycles dwarfs the most powerful hurricanes ever recorded on a planetary surface, creating a world of unceasing, roaring turmoil. Winds here do not merely gust, they scream across the horizon, driven by the massive thermal gradient between the searing, degenerate interior and the freezing vacuum of interstellar space. This constant exchange of heat creates a convective engine of such power that it keeps the entire atmosphere in a state of permanent high-velocity agitation for billions of years. To observe these weather systems is to witness the raw, unchecked power of gravity and heat, collaborating to create a climate of absolute magnificent violence. Deep within these complex atmospheric layers, the temperature profile remains so intensely high that common terrestrial substances like rock and iron cannot exist in a solid or even liquid state at the lower depths. The residual heat from the dwarf's primordial collapse continues to rise through the dense gas, maintaining a scorching environment that effortlessly vaporizes minerals into a thin metallic mist. In this hellish forge, the very foundations of what we consider a rocky world are reduced to shimmering gaseous plumes that swirl through the darkness in a state of permanent glowing agitation. Basalts, quartz, and iron ores are stripped of their solidity, transformed into a superheated vapor that behaves like a thick glowing fog. This vaporized matter is constantly churned by the rising heat, creating a dense, opaque soup that serves as the medium for all subsequent weather events. It is an environment where the very concept of ground is replaced by a scorching, gaseous abyss that becomes thicker and hotter the further one descends toward the core. Surprisingly, as these vaporized minerals eventually drift toward the slightly cooler upper altitudes, they begin to condense into heavy, suffocating clouds of silicate dust and liquid rock. These are not the soft, ephemeral, water-based clouds of a familiar terrestrial sky, but massive, abrasive formations of literal liquid minerals suspended in the churning hydrogen gas. These mineral clouds are so incredibly dense and opaque that they form a near impenetrable shroud, trapping the internal heat and defining the visual boundaries of the entire celestial body. Inside these clouds, a microscopic sandstorm of molten glass and rocky grit rages perpetually, scouring anything that might attempt to pass through the churning atmosphere. The silicate particles collide and merge, forming larger droplets that eventually become too heavy to remain aloft in the high-altitude winds. This creates a cycle where the very air itself is made of the components of mountains, circulating in a perpetual loop of evaporation and condensation. Imagine standing under a sky where the primary form of precipitation consists of pure, molten iron droplets falling at terminal velocity through a crushing high-pressure atmosphere. As the gaseous iron in the lower decks rises and hits the cooler regions of the upper clouds, it transforms into liquid metal, raining back down in a heavy, searing deluge. Notice the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest as you contemplate this violent metallic cycle occurring in the absolute silence of the interstellar void, far from any observer. This iron rain does not fall in gentle pitter-patter, but in a thundering, high-speed cascade of molten weight, hitting the lower, hotter layers and vaporizing once more before it can ever reach the core. The sound of this metallic rain would be a deafening metallic roar, a constant percussive background to the screaming supersonic winds that dominate the horizon. It is a closed-loop system of liquid metal, a hydrological cycle where iron replaces water and fire replaces the sun. Powerful supersonic winds, driven by the intense internal heat and the dwarf's rapid rotation, whip these metallic storms across the entire globe in massive horizontal bands. These jet streams move at speeds that defy human comprehension, carving the atmosphere into distinct racing zones of high-pressure turbulence that wrap around the sphere like a tight harness. This structure creates a striped appearance, where different chemical compositions and temperatures are dragged into endless high-speed circuits around the equator and the poles. The shear between these bands is so great that it creates massive vortices and eddies, churning the gas and dust into a complex marbled pattern of light and dark. Because the dwarf spins so quickly, the Coriolis effect is amplified to a terrifying degree, preventing any weather system from moving vertically for long before it is flattened into a horizontal race. These winds are the primary architects of the dwarf's external face, sculpting the clouds into the long, elegant streaks that define its visual identity. Colossal storms, significantly larger than the Great Red Spot of Jupiter, can rage for centuries within these bands without ever showing signs of dissipating or losing energy. These are not temporary weather events like the storms on Earth, but permanent features of the dwarf's geography, fueled by the inexhaustible convection currents rising from the degenerate core. They represent a scale of atmospheric stability and violence that is entirely alien to our experience, standing as ancient, swirling monuments to the object's internal power. Within these great vortices, the silicate and iron clouds are whipped into a frenzy, creating a central eye of relative calm surrounded by a wall of supersonic metallic rain. These storms act as massive heat vents, allowing the energy of the deep interior to bypass the thicker cloud decks and reach the upper atmosphere. They have survived for longer than the entire civilizations on Earth, spinning in the dark with a mechanical, unyielding persistence that outlasts the stars themselves. As the dwarf spins with incredible speed on its axis, these massive, opaque cloud layers occasionally break apart or thin out, momentarily revealing the much hotter, glowing layers beneath. This structure acts like a flickering lamp in the dark, where gaps in the silicate shroud allow the intense thermal radiation of the interior to beam out into the void. Feel the stillness of your limbs as you visualize these rare clearings in a sky of molten rock, exposing the white-hot reality of the depths that usually remain hidden. These hotspots are transient and ever-shifting, appearing and disappearing as the supersonic winds pull the cloud decks apart in a violent celestial dance. To an observer, these openings would look like glowing wounds in the dark skin of the dwarf, revealing a core of fire that never truly sleeps. They provide the only glimpses into the true heart of the object, showing that the dark exterior is merely a mask for a much more energetic reality. This shifting and chaotic cloud cover causes the object's overall brightness to dramatically fluctuate over the course of mere hours, a phenomenon known to astronomers as photometric variability. Because the dwarf is not a static, solid surface but a living, breathing system of moving storms, its visual signature is constantly evolving in real time. From a distance of many light years, these fluctuations provide a detailed rhythmic map of the weather patterns and wind speeds occurring in that distant, lightless world. Notice how this chaotic, high-energy turbulence creates a deeply layered atmosphere that is completely alien to the structured thin air found on rocky planets like our own. The transition from the vacuum of space to the crushing metallic depths is not a clear line, but a vast graduated zone of increasing density and chemical complexity that stretches for thousands of kilometers. This unique architecture blurs the very definition of a surface, creating a world where the sky eventually becomes as thick and heavy as the Earth itself. This final structure is best understood as a swirling, turbulent cauldron of vaporized metals and scorching gases, held together by an unbreakable gravitational grip. Within this cosmic vessel, the laws of chemistry and meteorology are pushed to their absolute limits, forging an environment of hypnotic, terrifying beauty that defies simple classification. It is a place where the distinction between a planet's air and its internal fire has dissolved completely, leaving only a magnificent, raging storm in the dark. The heavy minerals that form the clouds, the metallic rains that fall from the heights, and the supersonic winds that drive them all work in a perfect, violent harmony. This cauldron represents the final, most complex expression of the brown dwarf's atmospheric life, a state of perpetual motion and chemical transformation. It stands as a testament to the fact that even in the absence of a star's light, the universe can create worlds of staggering complexity and unrelenting power. This cooling is the defining arc of their existence, a long and lonely descent from the fires of their creation toward the absolute zero of deep space. Every moment of their lives is spent losing the struggle against the cold, a gradual surrender of thermal energy that characterizes their entire physical history. They do not die in a flash of glory, but rather fade away, in a silence that spans billions of years. As they drift through the lightless interstellar reaches, their once vibrant atmospheres settle into a state of deepening calm, as the convective energy that drove their supersonic winds slowly begins to falter. The transition is not sudden, but a measured rhythmic loss of heat that dictates every chemical reaction and every shift in colour. This is the ultimate fate of a world that gathered almost enough matter to ignite, only to spend its life cooling in the shadow of that missed opportunity. Astronomers have mapped this long thermal retreat by classifying their cooling stages using a unique alphabet of specific spectral letters, specifically the characters L, T, and Y. Each letter represents a profound transformation in the object's physical state, a milestone on the road from a glowing ember to a frozen cinder. This classification system acts as a map of time and temperature, allowing us to understand exactly where a dwarf stands in its multi-billion-year journey toward darkness. The sequence provides a structural framework for a life cycle that otherwise lacks the dramatic events of a star's evolution, such as a nova or collapse. As an object transitions from one spectral type to the next, its entire chemistry undergoes a fundamental shift, reflecting the loss of energy from its deep interior. It is a slow-motion metamorphosis, where the very makeup of the clouds and the colour of the light change in lockstep with the dropping temperature. By reading these spectral signatures, we can peer into the heart of the cooling descent and identify the specific atmospheric markers that define each era. This nomenclature captures the essence of a world in flux, a celestial body that is defined more by what it is becoming than by what it currently is. It is a systematic way of documenting the long, inevitable slide of a massive world into the freezing embrace of the cosmic background. The Dwarfs represent the vibrant, energetic youth of this species, still radiating the deep, bruised red heat of their recent birth in the galactic nurseries. At this stage, they are at their warmest and most active, possessing enough residual energy to sustain the violent weather patterns of molten metal and silicate dust described before. They glow with a dull, persistent luminescence that is just barely visible to the most sensitive infrared instruments, marking them as the brightest of the failed stars. Their atmospheres are thick with the vaporized remnants of their formation, and the internal temperatures are still high enough to prevent the formation of more complex molecular bonds. This phase is the peak of their luminosity, a time when they most closely resemble the low-mass red dwarf stars that manage to ignite their hydrogen. Despite their heat, they are already on the cooling curve, shedding energy into the dark at a rate that their cores can never match. If we were to look closer, we would see a world that is intensely colourful and chaotic, a magenta orb still pulsing with the kinetic energy of its collapse. This period of warmth is relatively brief compared to the trillions of years of darkness that will follow, making the Dwarf a rare and precious glimpse into the initial fire of a failed sun. They are the elders of planets but the infants of stars, caught in a radiant moment that is already beginning to slip away. As time marches on with a relentless and cold indifference, the heat eventually dips low enough for the dwarf to transition into the T-dwarf phase, where methane begins to form in their cooling skies. This chemical milestone marks a significant shift in the atmosphere, as the cooling gases finally allow carbon and hydrogen to bind together in stable molecular chains. The appearance of methane acts as a powerful filter, absorbing specific wavelengths of light and giving these objects a distinct and ghostly spectral signature. Surprisingly, this methane formation completely alters the way the dwarf radiates its remaining heat, effectively cloaking the deeper layers behind a new chemical shroud. Notice how the weight of your own body feels supported and still, much like the settling gases in these aging, darkening spheres as they calm. The chaotic storms of the younger years begin to organize into more stable patterns as the temperature gradient between the interior and the surface slowly diminishes. The T-dwarfs are much cooler and dimmer than their L-type predecessors, representing the middle age of a substellar object's journey through time. They are worlds of methane haze and ammonia clouds, drifting through the galaxy like giant dark versions of the gas planets we find in our own solar system. This era represents a stabilization of the cooling process, a long plateau where the object remains visible only as a faint thermal whisper in the dark. Eventually, the long descent leads these objects to become dwarfs, the oldest and most frigid members of this strange and lonely celestial family. At this extreme stage of their evolution, they have lost nearly all of their primordial heat, cooling to temperatures that are essentially alien to any other star-like body. They are the true ghosts of the Milky Way, drifting in such deep obscurity that they merge almost perfectly with the freezing background radiation of the universe. In the atmospheres of these dwarfs, even the most volatile gases begin to condense into icy clouds, and the once roaring winds have slowed to a quiet, frigid crawl. They represent the final frontier of substellar exploration, objects that are so cold they challenge our very definitions of what a sun or a planet can be. They have spent billions of years shedding their heat, and now they exist in a state of near-permanent hibernation, waiting out the end of time. The light they emit is so faint and shifted so far into the mid-infrared that it requires our most advanced space-based telescopes to even verify their existence. They are the ultimate expression of the cooling descent, a world that has finally reached the twilight of its thermal life. In the vast, dark stretches between the stars, they wait in a silence that is as profound as it is cold, having survived the death of the heat that once defined them. Surprisingly, the universe contains some of these white dwarfs that have cooled to such a degree that they are no warmer than a typical human body. This is a staggering realization that completely bridges the gap between the scorching reality of a star and the biological reality of life as we know it. We are accustomed to thinking of celestial bodies as either freezing rocks or burning balls of fire, but these objects occupy a miraculous lukewarm middle ground. These body temperature worlds possess a surface heat that would feel familiar and non-threatening, a gentle warmth that defies the typical violence of the cosmos. They drift through the freezing void of space, carrying a soft internal glow that is no more intense than the heat radiating from your own skin. This lack of extreme temperature allows for a bizarre and unique form of atmospheric chemistry that simply cannot exist in the harsher environments of warmer stars. The existence of such objects proves that the cooling process can produce environments that are unexpectedly gentle and strangely recognizable to our own senses. They are silent, massive spheres of gas that have reached a thermal equilibrium with the life they could never actually support. In the grand spectrum of the universe, they are the only stars you could potentially walk through without being destroyed by the very heat that makes a star what it is. If we were to look closer at these icy titans, we would find that you could theoretically touch the outer atmosphere of a white dwarf and feel only a mild room temperature warmth. This tactile paradox is one of the most hypnotic aspects of their cooling journey, suggesting a celestial object that is approachable and soft rather than distant and searing. Imagine the sensation of a gentle, tepid breeze brushing against your hand, originating from a core that once pulsed with the heat of a collapsing nebula. As you maintain a steady, calm breath, consider the immense distance between this mild sensation and the violent, iron-raining storms of the dwarf's earlier years. This structure has shed its ferocity so completely that it now offers a sensory experience that is almost comforting in its familiarity. The crushing gravity still remains, but the thermal threat has vanished, replaced by a temperature that mirrors a pleasant spring day on Earth. This theoretical encounter highlights the extraordinary path of the cooling descent, where a failed star eventually becomes a world of temperate shadows. It is a place where the fire of creation has been replaced by the quiet, steady warmth of a dying ember that refuses to go out. To touch such a world would be to make contact with a piece of the universe that has finally found peace after a billion-year struggle with its own heat. Picture a celestial object slowly fading into a dark, frozen cinder over a span of time that reaches into the trillions of years. This incredible duration is almost impossible for the human mind to grasp, as it extends far beyond the current age of the universe itself. While the bright stars we see tonight will burn out and explode in a few billion years, these cooling dwarfs will continue their slow, quiet fade for an eternity. They are the ultimate marathon runners of the cosmos, outlasting every other radiant structure through the sheer efficiency of their slow thermal loss. Their descent is so gradual that it becomes a masterpiece of entropy, a perfectly measured transition from light to dark that covers the entire history of time. As the universe itself expands and cools, these objects will be some of the last things to remain recognizable, long after the galaxies have drifted apart. Notice how the stillness of the room around you reflects the eventual frozen state of these massive worlds as they reach the end of their cooling curve. They will eventually become dark, solid husks of degenerate matter, roaming the void as invisible monuments to the era of light. Their journey is a long, slow goodbye to the energy of their birth, a trillion-year fade into the ultimate darkness of the far future. Their absolute lack of a stable internal heat source means that their entire history is written exclusively in their steadily dropping temperatures. Unlike a planet with a changing climate or a star with fluctuating fusion cycles, a brown dwarf has only one story: the loss of its original energy. We can look at any individual dwarf and determine its age with remarkable precision simply by measuring how much heat it has left in its thermal bank. This makes them some of the most reliable witnesses to the history of the galaxy, as their cooling rate provides a stable reference point for the passage of time. They do not have the complex, messy life cycles of stars. They have only the elegant mathematical simplicity of a cooling stone. Every T-dwarf and Y-dwarf is a living record of a journey that began in the fire and is destined for the ice. This gradual and inevitable descent into total darkness makes the oldest among them nearly impossible to detect against the freezing cosmic background. As they reach the end of the Y-dwarf stage, their thermal signature becomes so faint that it effectively blends into the noise of the universe's own residual radiation. They become the ultimate masters of camouflage, massive spheres of gas and metal that are essentially invisible to every method of detection we currently possess. The galaxy is likely filled with these dark, cold cinders, a hidden population of trillions of worlds that have already finished their cooling descent and now drift in absolute obscurity. They are the silent majority of the universe's failed experiments, massive structures that exist in a state of perfect, lightless equilibrium with the void. We can only infer their presence through the gravitational influence they might exert on more visible objects that happen to cross their path. They represent the final stage of the twilight spectrum, a state where the distinction between an object and the emptiness of space has finally dissolved. Their journey is complete, having travelled from the magenta glow of youth to the pitch-black silence of the eternal night. In the end, they are the shadows that prove the light was once there, the cold remains of a fire that lasted for 1 trillion years. Even as the cold remains of a fire settle into a frozen state, an invisible and incredibly powerful force begins to manifest from the depths of the dark. Despite their lack of nuclear fire and the absence of a radiant stellar core, these dense spheres generate magnetic fields of staggering intensity. They are not merely passive, cooling husks. They are active, invisible powerhouses that reach out into the surrounding void with magnetic tendrils that far surpass the strength of many true stars. This magnetic architecture exists in the absolute darkness, weaving a complex and invisible web that can capture charged particles and warp the local fabric of space. It is a profound realization that a world so seemingly dead in the visible spectrum can be so intensely alive in the magnetic one. These fields act as a second skin, protecting the dwarf from the harshness of the interstellar medium while simultaneously defining its interaction with the wider galaxy. Every sweep of its magnetic arms carries a hidden energy that defies the visual silence of the night, reaching out across the void to claim its territory. The sheer volume of space influenced by these invisible lines is immense, creating a magnetosphere that can rival the size of a small star system. Within this zone, the laws of physics are dictated by the magnetic heartbeat of a world that refused to stay quiet. This structure owes its magnetic vitality to the combination of rapid rotation and a highly electrically conductive interior that creates a robust dynamo effect deep within. As the dwarf spins with the incredible velocity inherited from its birth, the liquid metallic hydrogen in its core is churned into a swirling conductive soup. This motion acts like a colossal electrical generator, converting the kinetic energy of the sphere's rotation into a massive self-sustaining magnetic field. Surprisingly, the universe allows these objects to maintain this dynamo long after their thermal energy has significantly diminished, proving that rotation is a far more enduring power source than nuclear fusion. The internal friction and the movement of superpressurized fluids create a constant, invisible hum of electromagnetic potential that defines the object's relationship with the rest of the galaxy. This dynamo is the beating heart of the dwarf, a relentless mechanical process that ensures the object remains a dynamic and active entity throughout its multi-trillion-year lifespan. It is the ultimate expression of the conservation of angular momentum, translated into the language of pure electricity. The core becomes a spinning engine of immense power, driving the invisible phenomena that crackle through the atmosphere above. In the dark of space, this mechanical heartbeat provides a vitality that has nothing to do with the light of a star. If we were to look closer at these objects using the specialized long-distance ears of radio telescopes, we would discover that they are effectively screaming into the cosmic void. While they may appear silent and dark to our optical instruments, they are some of the loudest radio emitters in the local stellar neighborhood. These radio emissions are not steady or gentle. They are sharp, staccato bursts of high-energy noise that crackle with the intensity of 1,000 lightning storms. Notice how the muscles in your jaw can relax as you imagine this invisible, rhythmic sound echoing across the light years, a secret broadcast that only our most advanced technology can decode. This radio screaming is the direct result of electrons being accelerated to near-light speeds along the twisting magnetic field lines. It is a chaotic, acoustic testament to the hidden power that refuses to stay buried beneath the heavy silicate clouds. Each burst of radio noise tells a story of magnetic tension and sudden release, a violent dialogue between the core and the outer vacuum. The universe is filled with these invisible voices, shouting their existence into an ocean of darkness that we once thought was empty. These signals represent the true voice of the brown dwarf, a persistent and energetic shout that outlasts the visible glow of its youth. They emit intense, pulsing beams of radio waves that rival the most powerful emissions of active hydrogen-burning stars. These beams are often highly directional, sweeping across space like the rotating signal of a cosmic lighthouse as the dwarf whirls on its axis. Every time the beam crosses our line of sight, it registers as a sharp, rhythmic pulse of energy that can be detected from across the vast interstellar distances. This regularity suggests a level of precision and order that stands in stark contrast to the turbulent, chaotic weather described earlier. This cosmic structure is not merely a source of noise, it is a source of highly organized, high-energy pulses that can serve as a navigational beacon in the dark. The sheer power required to generate these beams highlights the incredible efficiency of the internal dynamo, which converts rotational momentum into electromagnetic radiation with terrifying effectiveness. It is as if the dwarf is desperate to be noticed, reaching out with rhythmic pulses that pierce the silence of the galaxy. These beams carry information about the object's rotation, magnetic tilt, and internal state, serving as a scientific goldmine for those who know how to listen. In the vast, lightless stretches of the Milky Way, these pulses provide a steady rhythm that marks the passage of a lonely wanderer. Notice how these immense magnetic fields interact with the thin, outer layers of the atmosphere to create spectacular and purely electromagnetic phenomena. The magnetic lines of force do not simply sit static, they twist, stretch, and snap through the upper cloud decks, dragging charged particles along with them. This interaction creates a permanent high-energy environment where the very air is ionized and crackling with electrical potential. As the magnetic field lines move through the gaseous layers, they generate intense electrical currents that can heat localized regions of the atmosphere far above the ambient temperature. It is a dance of invisible forces and material gas, a partnership that ensures the upper reaches of the dwarf are never truly at rest. This electromagnetic weather is entirely separate from the heat-driven storms of the interior, creating a secondary layer of activity that defines the object's interaction with the void. Within this electrified sky, the chemical molecules are constantly broken apart and reformed, driven by the invisible hand of the magnetic field. It is a world where the air itself is alive with the hum of high-voltage currents, a magnificent display of nature's invisible power. Even without a sun to stir the air, the magnetic heart ensures that the atmosphere remains a place of constant transformation and energy. Gigantic and incredibly brilliant auroras dance across their poles, vastly outshining the famous northern lights of our own Earth by several orders of magnitude. These are not the fleeting, delicate curtains of green and red we find in our own sky, but massive, permanent coronas of light that would be visible from millions of miles away. They are powered by the constant bombardment of high-energy electrons channeled down the magnetic field lines into the cold upper atmosphere. As these particles collide with the molecules of hydrogen and methane, they release a flood of light that paints the polar regions in shimmering alien hues. If we could see in the radio or infrared spectrum with our own eyes, the poles of a brown dwarf would appear as blazing, unearthly crowns of fire. Feel the cool air in your lungs and the absolute stillness of your limbs as you envision these magnificent, silent light shows occurring in the total isolation of the deep dark. They are the crown jewels of the dwarf's magnetic empire, a visual manifestation of the incredible energies locked within its dense metallic heart. These auroral displays can cover nearly a third of the object's surface, creating a luminous beacon that defies the shadows. In the absolute quiet of interstellar space, these polar lights represent the final, beautiful defiance of a world that refused to fade into obscurity. Surprisingly, the universe provides a unique mechanism for these displays, as these auroras are powered entirely by internal magnetic energy rather than the external stellar wind. On planets like Earth or Jupiter, the auroras are fueled by the stream of charged particles flowing from the Sun, making them dependent on the activity of a parent star. A brown dwarf, however, is a self-sufficient engine of light, drawing its power directly from the rotation and the internal dynamo it carries within. This means that even the most solitary rogue dwarf, drifting in the lightless gaps between galaxies, can still host a spectacular glowing aurora at its poles. It is a profound independence, a celestial object that provides its own illumination and its own beauty without the need for a central sun. This internal power source ensures that the auroras can remain active for billions of years, long after the dwarf has cooled to the temperature of a summer night. It is as if the dwarf refuses to let the darkness win, generating its own light from the very core of its being. This self-sustaining radiance is a testament to the resilience and hidden vitality of these supposedly failed stars. By turning its own movement into light, the dwarf becomes its own protector and its own source of wonder in an empty universe. The celestial architecture occasionally flares up with sudden, violent bursts of energy that continue to puzzle and intrigue modern astrophysicists. Despite their reputation as fading embers, brown dwarfs are capable of releasing massive amounts of energy in incredibly short spans of time. These flares are not thermal in origin, they are magnetic, caused by the sudden reconfiguration of the magnetic field lines in the upper atmosphere. When the tension in these invisible lines becomes too great, they snap and reconnect, releasing a burst of kinetic and electromagnetic energy that can be thousands of times more powerful than a solar flare. These events can temporarily double or triple the brightness of the dwarf in certain wavelengths, creating a sudden, brilliant flash in the dark. It is a reminder that even the most stable-looking objects in the universe are subject to moments of extreme and unpredictable volatility. Notice how your body rests in total safety, while you contemplate these distant explosions of raw magnetic fury. Each flare is a signature of the dwarf's internal struggle, a sudden venting of built-up magnetic pressure that screams across the electromagnetic spectrum. These outbursts prove that the cooling descent is punctuated by moments of intense, star-like activity that challenge our assumptions about the dark. Magnetic reconnections in their high-altitude atmosphere can temporarily cause them to shine brightly in X-ray wavelengths, a feat usually reserved for the most active and massive of stars. During these events, the energy released is so intense that it strips electrons from atoms, creating a localized plasma that reaches temperatures of millions of degrees. For a few brief minutes, the cold and dark brown dwarf becomes a source of the most energetic radiation in the universe. This X-ray signature is a clear indicator of the incredible magnetic stress being managed just above the cloud tops. The sudden, invisible transition from freezing dark to scorching X-ray brilliance challenges our classification of these objects as failed, proving that they possess the capacity for star-like violence whenever their magnetic fields are pushed to the breaking point This capability highlights the extreme physics that govern the twilight spectrum, where even a cooling world can produce a high-energy outburst. The emission of X-rays from such a cold object is a profound cosmic irony, proving that the electromagnetic heartbeat is independent of the thermal glow. These bursts of radiation are like silent lightning, invisible to the eye but detectable by the sensitive instruments that monitor the heartbeat of the galaxy. It is a magnificent, invisible fireworks show, proving that the dark spaces of our galaxy are filled with hidden, high-energy events. Deep within their complex magnetic architecture lies a chaotic energy that completely defies their common reputation as quiet and inert failed stars. While they may be failures in the sense of hydrogen fusion, they are absolute masters of electromagnetic complexity and high-energy activity. The constant interplay between the internal dynamo, the rapid rotation, and the atmospheric interactions creates a world that is anything but calm. They are vibrant, active participants in the life of the galaxy, broadcasting their presence across the radio spectrum and lighting up their poles with massive auroras. We must look past the visible darkness to see the true energetic nature of these objects, which are arguably more magnetically active than the Sun itself. They are the hidden powerhouses of the cosmos, proving that light is not the only measure of a world's vitality or its ability to shape the space around it. As they drift through the eternal night, they beat with a magnetic rhythm that is both ancient and unrelenting. They are not merely shadows of the past, they are the active, crackling heartbeats of the invisible universe, pulsing with a power that will endure as long as the galaxy itself. This hidden vitality ensures that the story of the brown dwarf is one of constant invisible energy, a heartbeat that sounds in the dark forever. This heartbeat that sounds in the dark forever is most profound when the object has no neighbours to witness its rhythmic, invisible life. While many celestial bodies are bound in the tight gravitational embrace of a parent star, a staggering number of brown dwarfs exist as solitary wanderers, drifting through the galactic sea completely alone. They represent a quiet, independent population of objects that have escaped the traditional structure of solar systems, finding a strange and silent freedom in the vast reaches of interstellar space. These lone voyagers traverse the lightless gaps between the constellations, disconnected from the burning hearts of the stars we see in our night sky. Without the guiding light or the protective warmth of a sun, they navigate the immense vacuum as independent entities, governed only by the momentum of their own creation and the far-reaching influence of the galaxy's rotation. Their isolation is profound, yet it is a state that defines a significant portion of their species, revealing a universe that is far more populated in its shadows than we once dared to imagine. These rogue drifters were not always meant for such absolute solitude. They were likely born in crowded nurseries and then violently thrown out of their original home systems by a process of gravitational billiards. In the chaotic early stages of star formation, multiple massive bodies often compete for dominance within a single pocket of the parent nebula. As these protoplanets and infant stars jockey for position, their intersecting gravitational fields create an unstable environment where the smaller, less massive members are frequently flung outward. A near miss with a much larger star acts as a cosmic slingshot, accelerating the brown dwarf to velocities that allow it to break free from the system's orbital bonds forever. This violent eviction sends the object hurtling into the interstellar void, a cosmic castaway destined to spend the rest of eternity far from the warmth of its siblings. It is a harsh and random fate, a byproduct of the same celestial mechanics that build the stable solar systems we study. Moving invisibly through the dark, these massive spheres cross the vast empty spaces between stellar neighbourhoods, filling the voids that we traditionally perceive as a total vacuum. They occupy the cold, lightless regions between the suns, bridging the immense distances with their silent, steady progress. Because they do not emit visible light and only whisper in the infrared, they can pass through our local cosmic backyard without ever being noticed by traditional optical telescopes. They are the silent travellers of the Milky Way, charting paths through regions where the density of matter is so low that it approaches absolute nothingness. Surprisingly, the universe uses these dark wanderers to populate the immense reaches that define the scale of our galaxy, ensuring that even the most remote sectors are not truly empty. If we were to look closer with specialized infrared sensors, we would see a busy network of these solitary worlds weaving through the dark like ghosts. This structure's solitary nature makes it a pristine time capsule, fundamentally undisturbed by the intense eroding radiation that usually characterizes the space near active stars. While planets orbiting a sun are constantly bombarded by stellar winds and ultraviolet flares that alter their atmospheric chemistry, the lone brown dwarf remains in a state of chemical purity. Its heavy layers of methane, water, and ammonia are preserved exactly as they were millions of years ago, unaffected by external energy sources. Surprisingly, the universe sometimes allows these solitary paths to cross, leading two brown dwarfs to find each other in the dark and lock into a tight, eternal binary dance. This partnership is born from a shared origin, or a rare, chance encounter, where their mutual gravity overcomes the momentum of their wandering. Instead of drifting alone, they revolve around a common centre of mass, two dark spheres spinning in a silent, synchronized rhythm against the background of the stars. This binary state provides a unique opportunity for astronomers to calculate their true mass with incredible precision, as the orbital period directly reveals the strength of their gravitational pull. They become a self-contained system of two, a miniature solar system where neither body has enough mass to ignite, yet both are bound together by an unbreakable invisible bond. The interaction between their magnetospheres can create even more complex and brilliant auroral displays as their magnetic fields overlap and intertwine in the void. If we were to look closer at these binary pairs, we would find that they often orbit each other so closely that they complete a full revolution in just a few Earth days. The proximity is staggering, with the two massive bodies dancing in a space that would fit comfortably within the orbit of Mercury. This tight gravitational locking causes immense tidal forces to ripple through their gaseous interiors, generating even more internal friction and heat. The rapid orbital movement creates a dynamic environment where the weather systems of one dwarf may be influenced by the presence of the other. They are locked in a permanent high-speed embrace, whirling through the dark like two heavy tops spinning on a shared table. Despite being failed stars, the energy generated by this close-range dance is immense, proving that gravity can create a vibrant, active environment even in the absence of nuclear fusion. Deep within the shadows of our own cosmic backyard, the universe allows these dark, invisible wanderers to exist closer to our solar system than almost any real star. While we are accustomed to thinking of the nearest stellar neighbours as bright, recognizable suns like Alpha Centauri, there are likely dozens of brown dwarfs hidden in the space even closer than that. They lurk in the shadows of our local neighbourhood, drifting silently through the nearby void without reflecting enough light for us to see them. Notice the steady, rhythmic rise of your chest as you contemplate the fact that a massive world could be hiding just around the cosmic corner. This proximity highlights just how much of our local surroundings remains a mystery, hidden behind the veil of the infrared spectrum. They are the true neighbours of the sun, the quiet residents of the local block who have gone unnoticed for centuries because they do not shout with the brilliance of fusion. The Lumen 16 system, a pair of orbiting brown dwarfs discovered relatively recently, serves as a startling example of this local, hidden population. Located only 6 light-years away, this binary pair is significantly closer to us than Sirius or Vega, yet it remained completely invisible to humanity until the year 2013. Its discovery was a landmark moment in modern astronomy, proving that massive, complex worlds can hide in plain sight if they choose not to glow in the visible spectrum. The system consists of 2 cooling dwarfs that are roughly similar in mass, revolving around each other in a slow, elegant dance that has lasted for billions of years. By observing Lumen 16, scientists have been able to create the very first weather maps of a brown dwarf, tracking the movement of its clouds as it rotates. It serves as a natural laboratory located right on our doorstep, offering a clear view into the atmospheric processes and cooling histories of objects that were once purely theoretical. These solitary wanderers silently map the dark spaces of our galaxy, far outnumbering the bright, burning stars that usually steal our attention. While the brilliant suns are the landmarks of the cosmos, the brown dwarfs are the foundation of its true mass, filling the gaps with a hidden, silent majority. For every star that ignites and burns with the fire of fusion, there are likely several of these failed attempts drifting through the shadows. They represent the true scale of creation, proving that the universe is far more productive in its production of substellar mass than we previously assumed. By existing in the dark, they force us to reconsider our definitions of what a galaxy is, moving away from a map of light and toward a map of mass. In the end, the story of the galaxy is not just written in the brilliance of its suns, but in the quiet, enduring presence of the wanderers who call the darkness home. The enduring presence of these wanderers who call the darkness home is made even more miraculous by the silent architectural relics of their early development. In their absolute youth, many of these substellar objects are surrounded by flat, spinning disks of primordial dust and gas, mirroring the grand structural designs found around the most massive stars. This structure acts as a swirling, dusty halo that catches the faint, nascent heat of the newborn core, creating a silhouette of intricate rotating rings against the deep velvet of space. These disks are the cosmic cradles where the raw materials of the nebula are organized and refined by the patient hands of gravity. Deep within these dark rings, the chemical fingerprints of water vapor and organic molecules wait for the right conditions to settle and grow into something more complex. If we were to look closer, we would see a familiar inventory of cosmic debris, swirling in a silent, freezing carousel around the dim crimson core of the young dwarf. This structure proves that the potential for complexity is a fundamental property of the universe itself, woven into the very fabric of the gas and dust that populates the dark. These building blocks are the universal currency of creation, spent just as freely on the shadows as on the light. Deep within these swirling rings, the quiet and relentless labour of gravity and friction begins as microscopic dust grains collide and stick together to form the very first pebbles of a future world. This process occurs in near absolute silence, a delicate dance of electrostatic forces and low-velocity impacts that gradually build something solid out of the ethereal gaseous mist. Each successful collision is a tiny but pivotal event, a microscopic union that slowly clears a path through the dense, obscuring haze of the rotating rings. It is the beginning of a magnificent transition from the invisible dust of the nebula to the tangible reality of solid matter. Over countless millennia, these growing pebbles sweep up more material, their mass increasing as they navigate the turbulent currents of the surrounding primordial gas. This structure of grit and ice becomes the foundation for a much larger architectural project, a gradual accumulation of matter that defies the darkness of the central dwarf. It is a slow, steady progression that demonstrates the unyielding persistence of physical laws in even the most isolated and lightless corners of our galaxy. These pebbles are the silent seeds of a solar system, waiting for the aeons to pass so they may claim their place in the dark. Over the course of several million years, these humble pebbles accrete into significantly larger rocky bodies, eventually creating miniature planets that orbit their dark host in a permanent shadowy rhythm. The scale of this formation process is essentially a perfect mirror of the events that created the Earth, but executed on a much more intimate and compact level. These fledgling worlds emerge from the debris, clearing their orbital paths and cooling into solid, recognizable spheres that huddle close to the fading warmth of the central dwarf. They are the survivors of the disk, the final products of millions of years of patient gravitational gathering. Notice the rhythmic, calm movement of your own hands resting at your sides as you visualize these tiny worlds finding their places in the dark void. They are the children of the twilight, born from a failed star but possessing all the structural integrity and geologic potential of the planets we know so well. This accretion process happens far from the eyes of the galaxy, a hidden manufacturing of worlds that takes place in the soft, infrared glow of a substellar parent. These miniature planets represent the ultimate triumph of mass over the void, solid islands of matter in an ocean of gas. Picture a tiny, scaled-down solar system where the central sun emits no visible light, a dark clockwork of planets and moons revolving around a magenta or deep red orb. This miniature arrangement is a masterpiece of cosmic efficiency, where the distances between the worlds are compressed into a space that would be barely a fraction of our own inner solar system. The central body, though dim, still exerts a massive gravitational pull that keeps its small entourage in a tight and disciplined orbital formation. It is a solar system in miniature, a compact and elegant assembly that operates according to the same laws that govern the larger star systems. This structure exists in a state of perpetual dusk, where the concept of day is defined only by a slightly brighter shade of crimson across the horizon. It is a hauntingly beautiful vision of a solar system that never quite made it to the light, a silent assembly of worlds moving through the void in absolute unison. These miniature systems are the forgotten shadows of the galaxy, proving that gravity can build an empire even in the absence of a burning sun. They are isolated kingdoms of dark matter and rocky surfaces, spinning in a silence that has lasted for billions of years. Any planets lucky enough to be orbiting a brown dwarf would experience a sky dominated by a massive dim crimson orb that hangs forever in the firmament. Because these planets must huddle so incredibly close to the dwarf to receive any detectable warmth, the central body would appear dozens of times larger than the sun appears in our own sky. It would not be a piercing, white-hot point of light, but a soft, glowing wall of dark red or deep magenta that fills the vision of any observer on the surface. This massive presence would define the entire aesthetic of the world, bathing every mountain and valley in a somber infrared glow. The horizon would be constantly saturated by this low-energy radiance, casting long, soft shadows that never truly disappear into the brightness of a traditional noon. If we were to look closer at the surface of such a world, we would see a landscape defined by the subtle contrasts of thermal heat, rather than the harsh glare of visible light. It is a surreal and hypnotic vista, a world where the sun is a giant, cooling ember that provides a permanent, somber twilight to the heavens above. The sky is a canvas of deep purples and reds, a constant reminder of the gentle dying fire of the parent star. Because the central body constantly cools and shrinks throughout its lifespan, the habitable zone for these planets rapidly and relentlessly shifts inward toward the core. A world that begins its life at a comfortable warm distance will eventually find itself in the freezing dark as the dwarf's thermal output inevitably fades over the aeons. This structure creates a moving target for any potential environment, forcing the boundary of liquid water to migrate across the orbital paths over hundreds of millions of years. It is a solar system in constant thermal flux, where the warmth is always retreating toward the centre. As the dwarf densifies and loses its initial heat, the planets are left stranded on the outer edges of warmth, their atmospheres slowly freezing as the crimson orb dims. This dynamic shift is a unique challenge of the substellar life cycle, where the very definition of a safe orbit is a temporary and fleeting concept. Notice how the ground beneath you feels solid and unchanging, a stark contrast to the shifting thermal instability of these wandering miniature systems. The planets are caught in a slow-motion race against the cold, forever chasing a warmth that is destined to vanish. Furthermore, the intense magnetic flares and radio bursts described earlier would frequently bathe these close-in planets in harsh, ionizing radiation that would scour any emerging chemistry. The lack of a stable, long-term thermal equilibrium creates a world of constant climate catastrophe, where the only certainty is the eventual loss of all usable energy. It is a beautiful but sterile arrangement, a solar system designed for the cold beauty of physics rather than the fragile long-term stability required for biology. These worlds are destined to remain magnificent, lonely laboratories of mineral and gas, untouched by the complexity of life. Yet, the existence of these complex mini-systems proves that planet formation is a truly universal process, not limited to the environment surrounding true burning stars. It demonstrates that the laws of gravity and accretion are so robust that they will create worlds even around objects that fail the test of stellar ignition. This realization fundamentally expands our understanding of where planets can exist, moving them from the exclusive domain of suns into the wider, darker reaches of the galaxy. It suggests that the universe is a far more efficient factory of worlds than we once imagined, producing planets in almost every gravitational well it creates. Surprisingly, the universe seems to favour the creation of these miniature systems, as the conditions for building planets are met in almost every pocket of collapsing gas. We are forced to reconsider the rarity of planetary bodies, seeing them now as the inevitable byproducts of mass gathering in the dark. This structure of worlds around a failed star is a profound testament to the creative power of the cosmos, which refuses to let a lack of fire stop the production of solid ground. The dark spaces are just as rich with planetary architecture as the bright ones, filled with the silent products of a universal law. If we were to look closer at the vast census of our galaxy, we might find that rocky moons and planets orbiting brown dwarfs are some of the most common worlds in the entire cosmos. Because brown dwarfs themselves likely outnumber the stars, the total population of their small orbiting companions could be truly staggering. These failed star planets would represent a hidden majority of the solid surfaces in our galaxy, drifting in the dark far from the reach of human eyes and traditional detection methods. They are the unseen foundation of the Milky Way's planetary family, a massive population of dark, rocky spheres. They are the silent, rocky foundations of the universe, existing in numbers that dwarf the few planets we have been able to photograph around bright suns. As you allow your breathing to remain slow and deep, consider the millions of these hidden worlds currently revolving around their dim, crimson parents in the silence of the night. They are the quiet, enduring presence of the substellar realm, a massive network of rocky spheres that complete our understanding of the galaxy's true diversity. These are the secret worlds of the twilight, the most numerous and yet the most invisible members of our celestial neighbourhood. The strange chemistry, sensory focus, the pungent scent of methane and ammonia locked in freezing high-pressure clouds. In the deepest shadows of our celestial neighbourhood, the massive and turbulent atmospheres of these cooling giants act as massive floating chemistry laboratories that span the entire globe. Unlike the searing, destructive fusion found in true stars, these worlds provide a remarkably stable and high-pressure environment where complex molecular reactions can play out over the course of billions of years. This structure serves as a titanic crucible, blending primordial hydrogen and helium with heavier elements to create exotic compounds that could never survive the intense radiation of a more radiant sun. Within these dense gaseous layers, the laws of chemistry are tested to their absolute limits, as the internal heat of the core rises to meet the freezing chill of the outer vacuum. Every cubic kilometre of this air is a swirling vortex of molecular transformation, synthesizing new substances that would be impossible to replicate in any terrestrial environment. It is a world where the atmosphere itself is a living, breathing experiment in the potential of matter to organize itself in the total darkness of space. These floating laboratories offer a unique window into the molecular origins of our galaxy, preserving ancient chemical paths that have long since vanished from the hotter, more violent regions of the cosmos. By studying these environments, we can unlock the secrets of how matter behaves under extreme gravitational weight without the interference of stellar fire. This chemical complexity is the hallmark of a world that has transitioned from the simplicity of a star to the intricate architecture of a giant planet. Because they lack the intense and destructive ultraviolet radiation emitted by true burning stars, delicate and complex molecules are permitted to survive and thrive within these tranquil dark layers. On a typical planet orbiting a sun, high-energy photons constantly bombard the atmosphere, ripping molecular bonds apart and preventing the growth of large, intricate chemical structures. Here, in the absolute absence of such solar aggression, chemistry is allowed to develop with a level of complexity and stability that is virtually unknown in the brighter parts of the galaxy. This shielded sanctuary provides the perfect environment for long-chain molecules to form and persist, protected by thousands of miles of obscuring high-pressure gas and silicate dust. It is a hidden realm where the delicate dance of molecular bonding operates in a state of permanent shadowy peace, far from the eroding winds of stellar fire. This lack of radiation acts as an invisible umbrella, sheltering the fragile building blocks of matter from the harshness of the wider universe. As these molecules interact in the dark, they build a rich and layered tapestry of chemical potential that remains undisturbed for trillions of years. This allows for the accumulation of rare chemical compounds that serve as a testament to the peaceful nature of these dark substellar environments. Every molecule becomes a permanent resident of the atmosphere, contributing to a chemical signature that is as deep as it is mysterious. Notice how carbon and hydrogen bond with incredible ease in these specific high-pressure environments to form vast quantities of methane gas that saturate the upper cloud decks in a thick blue-tinted haze. As the temperature of the dwarf inevitably drops through the aeons, the conditions become perfect for the formation of this potent hydrocarbon, which eventually defines the object's unique infrared signature. This structure of methane acts as a powerful greenhouse filter, trapping internal heat and creating a specific spectral identity that distinguishes these worlds from their hotter, more star-like siblings. The scent of this atmosphere would be sharp and pungent, a distinct sensory marker of the massive chemical shift that occurs as a star fails and begins its long descent into planetary status. This methane is not just a gas, but a defining characteristic of the dwarf's middle age, marking its transition into a cooler, more planetary state of existence. It represents a magnificent chemical milestone where the elements of life begin to dominate the environment of a dying, cooling sun. Within these methane clouds, the internal warmth of the core is preserved against the freezing void, allowing the dwarf to glow faintly in the dark for aeons to come. This pervasive gas creates a shimmering, hypnotic atmosphere that serves as the hallmark of the T-dwarf classification. It is a chemical transformation that turns a fading star into a giant world of gas, methane, and shadows. In the significantly older and colder white dwarfs, ammonia becomes a dominant chemical player in the upper cloud decks, creating thick, pungent formations that swirl through the frigid atmosphere in a state of permanent agitation. As the internal furnace continues to fade toward the temperature of a summer day, the atmospheric pressure allows ammonia to condense into liquid droplets and icy crystals. This chemical transition adds a sharp, distinct layer to the already complex chemical mix, creating a world that smells of cleaning fluids and frozen alien molecules. Notice the calm, steady weight of your own body and the rhythm of your breath as you visualize these freezing, nitrogen-rich storms raging in the absolute silence of the interstellar void. The appearance of ammonia is the ultimate sign of a world that has reached the end of its cooling journey, bridging the gap between a failed star and a giant gas planet. It is a cold and somber chemistry, reflecting the final stages of a journey that began billions of years ago in the fires of gravitational collapse. These ammonia clouds form a dense protective shroud that marks the final, coldest era of the brown dwarf's long and lonely life in the shadows. They signal the end of the thermal road, where the object finally finds its equilibrium with the freezing background of the cosmos. This chemical shift is the final signature of a world that has shed its stellar identity to become a cold and silent wanderer. Surprisingly, the universe allows water vapor to be an entirely common and vital component in these atmospheres, existing as superheated steam in the young dwarfs before transitioning into icy clouds in the older ones. This cycle of water provides a fascinating and unexpected link to the planetary meteorology of our own world, suggesting that even these failed stars share a fundamental ingredient with the oceans of Earth. In the hotter L-dwarfs, the water exists as a transparent gas, but as the temperature drops, it condenses into massive cloud structures that reflect the faint internal crimson light. This creates a dynamic, high-pressure environment where the boundaries between gas and liquid are constantly blurred by the extreme weight of the heavy atmosphere above. The presence of water molecules in such staggering quantities ensures that the cooling process is a humid and turbulent affair, filled with the potential for planet-wide rainstorms of liquid or ice. It is a cosmic irony that a failed sun should hold within it the very substance that defines the life-bearing worlds it can never truly support. These massive reservoirs of water vapour serve as a thermal buffer, regulating the speed at which the dwarf loses its ancient internal heat to the vacuum. By trapping the infrared glow, the water clouds extend the life of the dwarf's warmth, creating a temperate pocket in a universe of ice. This hydrological cycle, devoid of any surface, is a magnificent testament to the universal abundance of the building blocks of life. This structure holds vast and untapped reservoirs of complex hydrocarbons that could theoretically serve as the essential, prebiotic building blocks for the eventual emergence of organic chemistry. Far from being dead or inert cinders, these objects are rich in the types of carbon-based materials that define the potential for biological complexity throughout the wider galaxy. The atmospheres function as massive high-pressure storage vats for these chemical precursors, which swirl through the dark and interact in ways that defy our current understanding of cold star physics, while the extreme gravity and crushing pressures make the existence of actual life nearly impossible. The sheer volume of organic material suggests that brown dwarfs are major contributors to the galaxy's overall chemical diversity. These hydrocarbons are forged in the quiet, cooling layers of the atmosphere, representing a magnificent middle ground between the simple elements of a star and the complex molecules of a planet. They are the silent, chemical promises of life, floating in an environment that is both too heavy and too dark to ever see them reach fruition in a biological sense. This rich organic soup remains preserved in the deep freeze of the dwarf's massive shadow, waiting for trillions of years without any risk of thermal decay or radiation damage. By serving as a repository for these complex molecules, brown dwarfs act as the universe's long-term storage for the ingredients of creation. They are the guardians of organic potential, carrying the seeds of complexity through the lightless reaches of the interstellar medium. Surprisingly, the universe creates environments here that mirror the atmospheric composition of Jupiter, but executed on a much grander and more violent scale within these massive brown dwarfs. The chemistry of a mature dwarf is essentially a magnified version of our own local gas giants, featuring similar cloud decks of ammonia and methane, but driven by intense internal heat and crushing gravity. This symmetry across the scales of mass reveals a universal rule for how gas-rich bodies organize themselves as they cool and settle into their final, stable forms. Let your limbs feel heavy and relaxed, mirroring the way these massive atmospheres settle into organized chemical layers over millions of years of steady evolution. This structure allows us to use the brown dwarf as a massive natural laboratory for studying the physics of giant planets, providing a clearer view into processes hidden on smaller worlds. They are the older, more massive brothers of the planets we know, carrying the same chemical legacy into the deep dark of the interstellar void. By observing these distant giants, we gain a deeper appreciation for the common laws of nature that build worlds of all sizes throughout the cosmos. This mirror effect proves that the chemistry of a failed star and a giant planet are part of the same grand architectural plan. The universe does not invent new rules for the shadows, it simply amplifies the ones that govern the light. Astronomers use the specific and unmistakable chemical fingerprints of these molecules to precisely determine the object's age, temperature, and internal history with remarkable mathematical accuracy. Every molecular band in the infrared spectrum acts as a distinct notch on a chronological ruler, revealing exactly how much heat has been lost and what stage of life has been reached. This structure of chemical signatures allows us to conduct a form of forensic astronomy, reading the biography of a distant world by simply observing the light it radiates into the dark. The presence or absence of specific compounds, like carbon monoxide or methane, provides a clear and definitive map of the dwarf's progress through the spectral classes. It is a precise and elegant method of dating the universe's most elusive residents, turning the complexity of their atmospheres into a powerful scientific tool for galactic mapping. By listening to the chemical whispers of these dark worlds, we can uncover the secrets of their birth and the timeline of their eventual fade. These fingerprints are the only remaining evidence of the dwarf's violent past, preserved in the molecules that survive in its cooling outer shell. They allow us to reconstruct the story of a failed star with a level of detail that was once thought impossible. In the language of chemistry, the brown dwarf tells us exactly where it has been and how much longer it has to glow. As they continue to cool over billions of years, heavier elements and mineral vapours literally rain out of the upper atmosphere in a slow-motion process called gravitational settling. Elements like iron, magnesium and silicon, which once floated as superheated gases in the dwarf's youth, gradually condense and sink through the dense layers of hydrogen toward the lightless, unyielding depths. This process leaves the upper atmosphere remarkably pure and dominated by lighter gases, creating a stratified structure that changes the object's overall colour and spectral appearance. Notice the feeling of total, sinking relaxation in your own muscles as you imagine these heavy atoms drifting downward through the crushing pressure in a silent rainfall. This settling is the ultimate act of atmospheric purification, a billion-year housekeeping process that separates the heavy remnants of formation from the lighter molecules of the twilight years. It ensures that as the dwarf ages, it becomes a more refined and chemically distinct entity, settling into its final, frozen identity in the dark. This strange and relentless chemical stratification means that a brown dwarf literally changes its chemical identity and its fundamental visual appearance as it ages through the trillions of years. It is a world in constant slow-motion transformation, moving from a metallic star-like sphere to a molecular, planet-like one through the simple, unavoidable passage of time. The chemistry of the dwarf is its ultimate biography, a shifting and complex record of heat lost, bonds formed, and elements settled into the dark, silent interior. This final chemical state is the ultimate destination of the cooling descent, leaving behind a dark sphere that is both a failed star and a perfect planet. The atoms that were once destined for fusion are now locked in a complex molecular dance that defines the dark majority of our galaxy. In the end, the strange chemistry of the brown dwarf is a celebration of the diversity that exists in the shadows of the stars. This diversity that exists in the shadows of the stars is not merely an aesthetic curiosity, but a profound clue into the hidden mechanics of our entire galactic history. Deep within the architecture of cosmic evolution, brown dwarves serve as the ultimate missing link in our fundamental understanding of celestial mechanics and stellar formation. For generations, a massive conceptual void existed between the largest gas giants and the smallest, fusion-burning stars, leaving a gap in our knowledge that seemed almost impossible to fill. By existing in this grey area, they prove that nature does not always operate in clean, binary categories of planets and suns. This structure forces us to reconcile the laws of gravity with the laws of quantum mechanics in a way that no other object can. They are the essential connective tissue of the cosmos, providing a clear path of transition that allows us to see the universe as a single, continuous process of creation. Understanding them is the key to unlocking how the smallest seeds of gas can grow into the massive pillars of light that define our night sky. They seamlessly bridge the massive gap between the heaviest gas giant planets and the lightest red dwarf stars, proving that the universe operates on a continuous, unbroken gradient of mass and heat. This structure represents a physical and gravitational middle ground, where the characteristics of both distinct worlds overlap in a single, massive, and perplexing sphere. If we were to look closer, we would see an object that stubbornly refuses to be pinned down by our simple labels, possessing the dense heart of a star but the cool skin of a planet. Notice how your body remains perfectly still and supported, much like the stable, heavy equilibrium of these objects as they hang between two different states of being. They act as a cosmic measuring stick, allowing astronomers to see exactly where planetary physics ends and stellar physics begins. This bridge is not a barrier but a gateway, showing us that the difference between a world you can stand on and a sun that burns you is merely a matter of degree. By studying this bridge, we find that the galaxy is far more unified than we once dared to imagine. Studying these unique objects allows scientists to understand the exact mechanisms of how stellar atmospheres transition into complex cloud-filled planetary atmospheres over billions of years. Surprisingly, the universe uses these bridges to demonstrate the delicate handoff between high-energy plasma and stable molecular chemistry. This transition is not a sudden jump but a measured thermal progression that reveals how the internal heat of a core dictates the weather in the sky above. The brown dwarf is a natural laboratory where we can watch the birth of clouds from the cooling embers of a failed sun. It provides a level of detail that is impossible to find on true stars, where the intense radiation washes out the subtle chemical signatures of the atmosphere. By observing this handoff, we gain a deeper understanding of the very air we breathe and how the molecules of life can emerge from the fires of creation. These atmospheres are the ultimate storytellers, translating the intense history of the interior into a visible language of swirling dust and methane. Imagine an object that possesses the turbulent banded weather systems of Jupiter, but retains the independent, singular origin of the magnificent sun. This structure was born directly from the collapse of a cold molecular nebula, not from the leftover scraps of a protoplanetary disk orbiting a larger host. It is a star that never quite ignited, a massive world of planetary clouds that wanders the void without a parent to guide its path through the dark. This dual nature makes them some of the most fascinating entities in the known universe, challenging our definitions of what constitutes a home for a world. Notice the steady, calm rhythm of your own breath as you contemplate this massive, lonely sphere that is both a sun and a planet at once. It carries the weight of a star but the face of a giant gas world, a hybrid existence that defies the standard rules of celestial hierarchy. It is a reminder that the universe can create complex, independent worlds in almost any environment, even in the absolute absence of a central light. For decades, these entities were treated as purely hypothetical ghosts, existing only as mathematical possibilities within the quiet pages of astronomical textbooks. Theoretical models predicted their existence long before technology was sensitive enough to detect their faint infrared whispers against the freezing background of space. They were the dark matter of stellar evolution, a necessary but unseen component required to make the equations of the galaxy actually work. Astronomers searched for them with a sense of desperate curiosity, knowing that if they did not exist, our understanding of how stars are born would be fundamentally flawed. This era of hypothesis was a time of great anticipation, where the failed star was a legend waiting to be proven by the lens of a telescope. They were the invisible majority, the silent partners in the galactic dance that remained hidden behind the limits of our biological senses. This structure of belief and theory eventually paved the way for a revolution in how we see the dark spaces between the constellations. The first confirmed discovery did not occur until the year 1995, an event that forever changed our map of the local galaxy and validated decades of complex theory. Gliese 229b emerged from the shadows as a small, cool companion to a red dwarf, shocking the scientific community with its clear and unmistakable methane signature. This revelation proved that the missing link was not just a mathematical convenience, but a tangible, physical reality hiding in plain sight just a few light years away. If we were to look closer at that moment in history, we would see the dawn of a new era of infrared astronomy that prioritized the dim and the cold over the bright and the hot. The discovery was a catalyst for a massive hunt across the sky, leading to the identification of thousands of these twilight worlds in a few short decades. It was the moment the universe finally opened its secondary catalogue, showing us that the darkness was just as rich and populated as the light. This discovery was the bridge that allowed us to finally cross into the territory of the substellar. Because they cool so incredibly slowly, a brown dwarf will effectively outlive nearly every true star currently burning in the night sky. Without the volatile, fuel-consuming furnace of fusion to burn through their reserves, they conserve their primordial energy with a level of efficiency that is practically unmatched in nature. They are the ultimate long-term residents of the cosmos, destined to remain intact while the brighter, hotter stars consume themselves and explode in a few billion years. Feel the natural, unforced rhythm of your heart as you realize that these cooling spheres are the true masters of time, outlasting the very fires that birthed them. When the last of the suns has turned into a white dwarf or a black hole, these objects will still be there, radiating a faint warmth into the expanding void. They are the endurance runners of the universe, a magnificent testament to the power of a quiet, slow-burning existence. Their longevity ensures that they will be the last witnesses to the era of light, carrying the memory of the stars into the ultimate dark. Deep within their degenerate cores, they hold on to their original mass with an eternal and unbreakable gravitational grip that defies the corrosive effects of time. This structure is supported by quantum laws that do not rely on heat or fuel, meaning the core will never collapse or expand like a dying, volatile sun. They are massive, permanent fixtures of the galaxy, frozen in a state of structural immortality that ensures they will remain as solid spheres for trillions of years. Surprisingly, the universe has created in the brown dwarf a structure that is practically indestructible, a planetary heart that cannot be broken by the forces of entropy. While the stars around them change their shape and lose their mass to the winds of space, the dwarf remains a constant, unchanging pillar of mass in the dark. This quantum gridlock is the ultimate shield against the decay of the universe, preserving the object's identity long after its heat has vanished. They are the anchors of the galaxy, the heavy, silent weights that keep the cosmic balance even as the lights fade out. Long after the brightest and most massive stars have exploded as supernova or faded into white dwarfs, these dark spheres will continue their silent and lonely vigil. They are the final watchers of the galactic era, drifting through a universe where the lights are slowly being extinguished one by one across the vast, empty reaches. Their survival is a testament to the power of moderation, outlasting the giants through the sheer persistence of their quiet, cooling nature. They force us to realize that the universe is not just a simple choice between light and dark, but an infinite and beautiful spectrum of twilight. This realization dissolves the hard boundaries we have constructed around the objects of the heavens, revealing a much more nuanced and interconnected reality that spans the entire scale of mass. We are part of a cosmos that finds as much meaning in the fading shadows as it does in the brilliant burning suns of the night. The brown dwarf is the ultimate teacher of perspective, showing us that failure is often just a different, more enduring form of success. By existing on the edge of visibility, they remind us that the most profound mysteries are often the ones that require the most patience to find. They are the quiet majority, the silent residents of a galaxy that is far more complex than our eyes can see. This spectrum of twilight is the true face of the universe, a place where every shadow holds a world and every world holds a story. In the eternal twilight of the brown dwarf, we come to a final philosophical realization that the universe is defined not only by the stars that successfully ignite, but by the quiet, magnificent endurance of the worlds that almost did. This structure reminds us that even without the fire of a sun, a world can possess a complex, vibrant history and a presence that outlasts the most brilliant celestial displays. We find beauty in the slow fade, in the persistent heartbeat of a world that chooses to exist in the softest of shadows. Deep within your feet, the muscles are beginning to release the tension of the day, sinking into the heavy, grounded weight of the mattress. Your toes feel soft and warm, as if bathed in the distant, dim crimson glow of a twilight sky. This gentle relaxation travels upward through your calves and knees, turning your legs into heavy, solid pillars of rest. Surprisingly, the body mimics the cooling descent of a solitary wanderer, finding its most profound peace in the absolute absence of movement. Your hips settle further into the bedding, surrendering their weight to the invisible, steady pull of gravity. The stillness of the environment is now your only companion, guiding you away from the vastness of the outer reaches and into the sanctuary of the here and now. This quiet room holds you now in a cocoon of perfect safety and absolute silence. The movement of your breath has become a slow, rhythmic tide, moving in and out without any effort or thought. This stillness reaches into the base of your spine, allowing each vertebra to soften and flatten against the soft support of the bed. Your chest and stomach are rising and falling with a peaceful regularity, echoing the calm of a home at rest. Deep within your shoulders, the heavy knots of the day are simply dissolving into the pillows. The weight of your arms feels immense and pleasant, your hands coming to rest in a state of total, unmoving surrender. If we were to look closer at this moment, we would see only the softest, most natural transition into a deep and restorative state of being. The cool air in the room brushes against your skin, providing a gentle contrast to the warmth of the blankets wrapped around you. Your neck releases its final hold on the day, allowing your head to sink deeply into the softness of the pillow. Every muscle in your face is now smooth and entirely relaxed, from your jaw to the corners of your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is a vast and welcoming calm, free from any distraction or noise. You're perfectly centered in this quiet environment, safe and supported by the textures of your bed. Your mind is becoming as still as the air, letting go of every remaining image or word. The sheets are cool and smooth against your skin, a physical anchor to the comfort of the present moment. Each breath is a doorway leading you further away from the day and deeper into the rest you have earned. You're drifting now in a state of pure, weightless tranquility. Everything outside has faded into a distant memory, leaving only the soft sound of your own breath. Every exhale carries you a little further into the dark, a little closer to the dreams that wait for you. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.